Hello, parishioners. Congratulations. It's day 75. It's like our diamond anniversary of the Bible in a year. And I'm Father Mark, and we are finishing up the desert wanderings. As we know, this is it's been fun wandering through the desert. So soon they're going to be settling into the Holy Land, and the rest of the Bible is in the Holy Land in Israel. But this traveling through the Sinai desert has been an adventure, and we've been hearing it in the book of Numbers, kind of the story from beginning to end, the narrative of it, and then the book of Deuteronomy was the kind of summary, that last speech that Moses gave with a new sort of laws to get them ready to go into the Holy Land, and special laws because they were so unfaithful that they needed, very strict laws to keep them in line. But here they're going, but we're going to kind of miss this desert traveling. I'm kind of homeless right now. Actually, we three priests were kind of out of our rectory these days. It's kind of a funny story. We had several skunks that got under the house, and now it's terrible. We can't be in the rectory. And so we've had to go to hotels and now rectories and try to find places to stay. But it's kind of fun. I'm camping out. I even slept in my office one night on a pad, and so it's an adventure. So we're finishing up this adventure of wandering and camping in the desert. And it's like life. Life is a journey, and we're headed to our permanent home, which of course is heaven, is our real home. In the book of Numbers, chapter 30, there's interesting things about making vows. It was quite popular to make little oaths to promise something to God, and it's not really same as laws that are applicable to everyone, but these are personal vows or promises that people would make, and they were different for men and women. If as Father Michael Schmitz said, it seems a little unfair, but you have to understand, back then it was the head of the house, the father or the husband, who had to kind of keep order, and so he had the final say as far as any vows that were made by his spouse or by his children. At that time, it was the father of the house who was the head of the home, and that's just how it was. But particularly, some of these vows had to do with fasting and wearing sackcloth, or maybe even deciding not to have sexual relations. So it just had to be something that was, if you're in a relationship, if you're, a minor with parents, or if you're in a marriage, you can't just make a vow just on your own without consultation, or without the head of the house being aware of it and being in agreement with it. As we go through this part of the Bible in a year, it's Lent time, and Lent for us, we know, is a time of penance and gathering for special masses and stations of the cross. And we had chapter 29, verse 7 said, that on the Day of Atonement was a special day for the Israelites. The only day when they would, as it says here, to have a holy convocation. They would gather and they would afflict themselves. They would afflict themselves, which meant, fasting or wearing sackcloth, and those vows were also things that people would do, kind of like we make a promise to give something up for Lent. These were vows that people would make even for the rest of their lives to do some sort of penance or either temporary or for the rest of life. We don't know too much about all the details of what they would do back then, but it's a little bit like the Catholic Church, that they apparently would afflict themselves with some sort of penance. And sometimes it was, sexual abstinence, deciding to remain celibate for a time or for the rest of life. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 29, it's this section is called the Covenant Renewed. So in Moab, is finishing the desert wanderings, it's all these words and all these new second law, the second word from God after Sinai. And it says there in verse 1, these are the words of the covenant. But it says that was made in the land of Moab, and it says besides the covenant which he made with them at Horeb. Horeb is the Mount Sinai, is the same mountain. Horeb is another name for it. But so it's besides, and that means in addition to, or kind of aside from. So in other words, it's a new covenant. It's the same covenant, but it's a kind of a changed covenant. It's a renewal, but it's something new. And so this was, again, oath and promise to God. And a covenant was a relationship. It meant becoming family. It meant becoming, God's sons and daughters, and becoming also like a spouse. Marriage and adoption were the two kind of legal contracts that made someone a relative. And so a covenant is a beautiful thing, makes you family, but since they had been so unfaithful in the marriage with Yahweh, with God, and they had been so unfaithful as children of the Heavenly Father, they have these very strict laws. And so it's a covenant that's kind of had to be, it had to be renewed at Sinai after the golden calf, and now it's renewed a second time here in Moab with the Deuteronomy covenant. And it's kind of like this Mosaic covenant has had three different versions, and it's like an old car that's been, the hubcaps are missing and the radiator leaks, and it's kind of just got all the knobs and stuff are missing on the dashboard, and it's an old jalopy, and it's just barely moving along. And this is the Deuteronomic covenant. It's not ideal, but it was necessary to have these imperfect laws because of the hardness of their hearts. God kind of dumbed it down and made it. It wasn't as good. It was not it was more of a human law, not the perfect ideal law that was given originally. As I've said, a covenant always involved some sort of frightening curses or consequences. If someone didn't keep the consequence, there would be some sort of sacrificed animal or some sort of a image like a bow and arrow in the sky pointing upward toward God. These kind of things that were kind of saying that if you're not faithful, something's going to happen. It's a serious thing, and if you don't keep this, and that's what it speaks about here in chapter 29, starting there in verses 20 and following, and it speaks about all these curses. It keeps repeating all the curses. If you're not faithful, all the curses of this covenant will come upon you, and then the people around your great-grandchildren and the people who are foreigners, as it says there in verse 22, everyone will look and see, wow, look, those people were unfaithful, and then God punished them, and look, they got these sicknesses, and their whole land is brimstone and salt, a burnt-out waste, like Sodom and Gomorrah, no grass growing. If you're not faithful, God's going to send enemies, and you're going to suffer. And then everybody in the nations, verse 24, all the nations would say, why has the Lord done this to this land? What means the heat of this great anger? And then the answer would be, it is because they forsook the covenant. Now that reminds me of the book of Revelation, which speaks about, 7 bowls and 7 punishments that would constantly come. And that was kind of reference to the fact that God's holy people, Israel, and also the church, as Catholics, we have to realize that if we're unfaithful, it's like if you've been given much, much will be required. So greater punishments might come to someone who's a favorite son or a favorite child of the Father. So God's very strict with his people, and since we've been given so much in the Old Testament and the New Testament, if we're unfaithful, it's even worse than if we hadn't been given any blessings or promises and such. But it's because we are God's holy people that we're expected to be holy, and it's even worse if we're unfaithful.